Holding the flower bouquet in her hand, accompanied by her mother, Ryan walked down the long church hall towards the entrance. The organ played gentle music, and she felt the eyes of everyone on her. This marriage had been a marriage of worth, an arrangement between two underworld families for stronger ties. Her thoughts raced as she approached the altar where her soon-to-be husband stood with his back turned. Pews creaked and material swished as the entire church turned to set their eyes on the bride and groom. The closer she got to the altar, the nervous she became. As she lifted her gaze, her heart skipped a beat upon seeing her groom. He was tall, well-built, with lean hips, and his sailor suit accentuated his figure. His dark hair matched hers, and when he turned to face her, she was almost taken aback. She had never seen him before, and her stomach fluttered. Her heart danced as she observed him from behind her veil. He was older than she expected, and despite looking as exasperated as she felt, he stood dutifully waiting for her. Ryan noticed the subtle expressions on his face, a lowered brow, pursed lips, and a flexing jaw. His shoulders drooped with a heavy sigh as she approached. Marriages in underworld, arranged for a particular reason, bring a little tension in the air, so she could understand his exasperation. Though Ryan had only heard about Jungkook, known as a cold and ruthless mafia, however, she knew the ways of the underworld men, as she had seen the same in her family, cold, reserved, and duty-bound. But what was this man would be like as a husband? That was uncertain. He looked intimidating without a doubt, and when he moved, she instinctively stepped back from him. It took her mother's coaxing to push her forward. "What are you doing, Ryan?" her mother asked through gritted teeth, wearing a forced smile. It was clear that Ryan's mother was not very fond of her behavior, which she would tag as irresponsible. Ryan's husband-to-be took a step towards her, and she involuntarily leaned away. Ryan couldn't help but feel intimidated by his imposing presence. His resting, intimidating features made her uneasy, but it was oddly surprising when he smiled at her. Something changed within her at that moment. A warmth she had never experienced before blossomed in her middle, leaving her mouth dry. Without exaggeration, she could honestly say that this was the most handsome man she had ever laid eyes on. "Just a second," her mother smiled at Jungkook, guiding Ryan to face her. She lifted the ends of Ryan's veil over her head. Ryan's face must have looked paler than it felt, cause her mother whispered near her, "Breathe, Ryan, and act dutifully. What are you so scared about?" How had she asked that so casually, acting Ryan shouldn't be scared? She knew her daughter, as Ryan hadn't seen a lot, and marriage was a big commitment and change. It was normal for her to be nervous, but as always, she wasn't expecting softness from her mother. Ryan nodded at her mother and turned back to the man before her, who was intensely staring at her. She could not decipher his feelings. Apparently, he too was seeing her for the very first time, wasn't he? Did he even like her? She wished she could read his mind, but even his expression remained unreadable, increasing her fear with every passing second. Her mother took Ryan's clenched fist and attempted to hand her over to her to-be husband. The stranger observed her carefully, and she stared back in fright. The moment her cold knuckles brushed his warm hand, Ryan jolted as if shocked, pulling away and clasping her bouquet in a death grip. "Ryan," her mother scolded, this time audibly for him too, "you must take Jungkook's hand." Ryan began, but Jungkook's deep and rich voice like warm melted dark chocolate cut her off. "It's okay, don't pressure her." Her mother, dissatisfied, looked at Ryan, but gave Jungkook a warm, respectful smile as Junes were known to be superior and highly respected. "Mother, she is just nervous," her mother explained, attempting to save face as she always did, ashamed of her overly sensitive daughter. Jungkook responded clearly, but he didn't seem offended by anything Ryan was doing. Instead, he looked amused. The priest suspicious eyed them but proceeded with the ceremony at Jungkook's nod of consent. He preached about trust and loyalty, and Ryan could not take her eyes off the man beside her. Fear lingered in her heart, yet it fluttered in ways she could not comprehend. It would be too quick to judge if she said he was a gentleman, but honestly she did feel he was. Continuing, the priest said, "In this sacred bond of marriage, let us now exchange vows. Jungkook, you have been chosen to uphold the vows on behalf of the couple." Jungkook nodded, his eyes fixed on Wine, confident to articulate the sentiments of this wedding. The priest addressed Jungkook, saying, "As you stand here today, you're not just making a commitment to Wyan, but to a shared destiny. Repeat after me. I, John Jungkook, take you, Wyan, to be my lawfully wedded wife." Jungkook echoed the words sincerely, his deep eyes revealing little emotion. "I, John Jungkook, take you, Wyan, to be my lawfully wedded wife." Wyan's heart raced at the way he spoke and looked at her. The priest continued, "To have and to hold from this day forward." Jungkook repeated, "To have and to hold from this day forward." The priest went on, "For better or for worse, for richer or for poorer." Jungkook, his gaze fixed on Wyan, affirmed, "For better or for worse, for richer or for poorer." The priest then said, "In sickness and in health, until death do us part." Nervous as Wyan was, Jungkook seemed calm. Of course he would be. He wasn't sensitive like her. She doubted anyone would be. "In sickness and in health, until death do us part." Wyan breathed a heavy deep sigh. The priest directed Wyan to place the ring on Jungkook's finger, symbolizing the union, and proclaimed, "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Jungkook, you may now seal this commitment with a kiss." Her heart fluttered once more as the moment had arrived. Wyan stood rigid, closing her eyes, expecting reprimand. Instead, she felt a gentle, her eyes shot open as her husband cupped her cheek, deepened the sweet gay in front of their families and God alike. It was nice enough that her stomach knotted itself into a sweater. She let her as long as he wished, and when he pulled back, their gazes locked. She didn't understand the expression, but she was sure she looked like a blushing mess, staring at awe at a dream before her, the most beautiful man who, her like, he adored her. Then he took her hand and held firm, newly fed. Wyan sat at the edge of the king-size bed in her husband's room, his space, absorbing the new change in her life. Thoughts of her husband filled her mind, his voice, his face, his gestures. She was sure he was handsome, and his gestures contradicted what she had heard about him. Despite his terrifying reputation in the country, Wyan wondered how much she should rely on people's perspectives. After all, he was a person with much depth, and only those close to him could truly understand him. How much one could judge from others' perspective. Constant butterflies fluttered in his stomach, but the everlasting fear was there too. Wyan's marriage to Jungkook was decided based on a partnership between their fathers as soon as she turned 18. Then after 3 years, they finally took a decision to hold the marriage. Growing up, she knew she would have to marry according to her family's choice, as it was already decided, but she found it unfair that she didn't know what the man she was going to get married to looked like, but she hoped it would be the right one. While this marriage had political motives, strengthening the relationship between the families, Wyan somewhere had been naively dreaming about a dreamy marriage. All she wanted was for her husband to look at her with a smile. She did not have much dreams. But the nervousness never left her, and it stemmed from various sources, including the family tradition of consummating the marriage on the first night for a happy married life. That was an old tradition, and everyone had to respect it. Wyan was overly anxious about it, unsure of what he would be like, how it would be, and how it would feel. Despite her mother's teaching, she felt lost and nervous. Everything seemed new and foreign, making it hard for her to even sit still. As she heard the door opening behind her, Wyan slightly flinched, turning to see her husband entering. He softly locked the door, and she swallowed hard, palms sweating. The moment had arrived. She was alone with him. His movement exuded attractiveness, a broad back, big hands, and an undoubtedly heart-warming smile. Yet she pondered on what kind of husband he would be. What if he was only there to fulfill a family tradition, indifferent to who she was? What if it turned out to be and with no emotion whatsoever? What if he was like at the church, could have been for the show? She was overthinking again. He observed her from head to toe, and Wyan realized she was visibly nervous, sitting on the edge of the bed. As he looked up at her face, their eyes met, sparking something in her stomach. "Do you need something? Water?" His deep voice resonated through her, but she was too nervous to respond, unsure of what he was thinking or planning. Thus, she shook her head and denied. With a curt nod, he went to the side of the room where a bottle of wine sat on the table with 2 glasses. Pouring himself a drink, he turned and asked, "Your dress looks heavy. Are you uncomfortable in it?" Wine felt her heart drop, fearing he might meant for her to take her dress off. "No, stop." She mentally squeezed her eyes shut, telling her inner voices to stop making her more nervous. "Why don't you change it to something comfortable?" Sipping his drink, he suggested, "Washroom this side," pointing to the tall white door on his left leading to the washroom. She nodded slowly. What was to happen today was inevitable, and she sensed she had to stop overanalyzing his every word. Getting up from the bed, she felt his gaze on her. Ignoring him, she found what she was looking for, her suitcase. Bending down next to him, she unzipped it, nervous as he was watching her. But the nervousness soon converted into sheer embarrassment when the suitcase opened to reveal placed on top. Vian's eyes widened and she quickly closed the suitcase, unable to face the man beside her. She bit her lip hard, certain that he saw it. Then she felt him move away to give her privacy. Once sure he wasn't looking, she opened the suitcase again, pulled out her pajamas and hugged them to her stomach. With her head low, she hurried into the washroom, closing the door behind her. Cheeks burning in shame, she stood behind the door. Her cousin had bought this stuff, and despite Wine rejecting everything, it seemed like she had secretly placed it in her suitcase. Wine planned to deal with her later, hoping right now it did not seem like she was eager to Jungkook by wearing all this. In the church, when she first saw him, she felt butterflies, but when her veil was lifted, she didn't know how he felt, if anything at all. Was this marriage just a convenience as it had to happen sooner or later? Was it going to be like those typical marriages where he would be compelled to like her because she was his wife and they had to spend a lifetime together? Brushing off all her thoughts, Vine decided to not think much and changed from the overly heavy dress to her comfortable pajama set, the one she wore back at her house. He told her to wear something she was comfortable with, and that was all she was comfortable in. She took a deep breath before unlocking the door and slowly stepping into the room. As her gaze fell on her husband, she noticed he had shed his coat, his white shirt on display, with folded sleeves, the top free and unbuttoned. Undoubtedly, he looked even more attractive with a glimpse of his muscle chest and well-built body. "You want a drink?" he asked, bringing her back from her reverie, eyeing her up and down, probably checking her outfit. Blinking a few times, Vine shook her head slowly, lowering her eyes. "I don't drink," she replied, her voice sounding lower than she intended. Unsure of what was next, she walked and sat on the bed at the same place, at the same edge, fidgeting her fingers. The moment was coming close, and she was quite nervous about how it would begin, what he would do first. All she felt was his gaze on her as he stood against the drawer at a distance. "When you were proposed for the marriage, was your consent asked?" She stared up at him, and for a moment she just stared before responding because she hadn't expected he'd ask that. Yes, her consent was asked, but she knew she had to get married where they desired. "And what was your response to that?" "I denied at first, not because of you," she has to make clear, because somewhere she felt if she'd met him before and they'd have known each other, she'd have been dancing on her wedding today. "I didn't know you. I denied because I felt like maybe I won't be up to everyone's expectations just yet." "And what expectations did you think there would be?" Wine bit her lip again out of that annoying habit. She did that when nervous. What could she answer to him? Tell him that according to her family, she hadn't been a responsible daughter or remotely responsible for anything, but well, they still made her marry to a superior family, expecting of her to act like a proper responsible wife and daughter-in-law. I cannot say exactly, but you know my family also has expectations from me. Then your family. He lightly chuckled, and she noticed slight dimples in his cheeks, making him look less intimidating and more beautiful. He placed the wine glass on the table and moved closer to her. Her heart raced. I do not remember you exchanging ring with our families. I thought that was for me, Ryan. She bit her lips, cheeks flushing. He said her name and he spoke in a way that made her tingly everywhere as he continued. The deep rumble reverberated through her. Yes, she managed to speak, her voice low. That was for you. Those words felt so right to say to him that she wanted to say it again and again. Is that so? His eyes never left hers. And what were you thinking when you were walking down the aisle? When you put the ring on my finger, a strange heat filled her, a new sensation. Was he trying to know how she felt about this marriage? And was she to say exactly what she felt? She felt it would be bold, but he was her husband and she could not lie to him. But she could not resist to ask first. What if I asked the same question? She was eager and nervous to know his perspective. What were you thinking? His eyes glimmered and a slight smile, more of a hint, adorned his face. And there she felt, perhaps, she was ready to hear his answer. I saw a girl that I've been told about but never bothered to meet even once. He began. She was walking towards me, twisting her fingers because she was overly nervous, which I found normal and also a bit exciting because there I wondered what it would be like to bring her out of her shell. A twinkle of amusement flickered on his face. Then she stood in front of me and I was waiting for that moment when the veil was finally lifted off her face. He paused, increasing her anticipation. I saw her, she saw me, our eyes met, and instantly right there I knew she was mine. Ryan's heart stuttered, and she will always be mine. Blushing, Ryan felt overwhelmed by his words. She hadn't expected this, but she had dreamed about it, and she found herself completely melting in that same dream. My wife, he added, making her heart bloom. She looked beautiful. What Ryan felt right at that moment, she had never felt anything like this before. The warmth, the feeling, the attraction and infatuation, it was all new and beautiful. It did not seem like what she had heard, and the way he called her mine felt real and pure. She gathered courage to ask, why did you not want to meet me before marriage? She wanted to hear it directly from him, sensing he would be transparent with her, as now she had stepped into comfort zone. Because I wasn't serious about marriage, but I knew it was finally the time, he explained. Father is getting... For that, of course, I needed a partner by my side, did not I? She understood that part. So, this marriage was like one of the tasks I'd have to do. That's why I did not want to invest my precious time having dates and meetings like a teenager. You know what I mean. Her heart clenched a little. It seemed he did not care who he was going to get married to. Just a girl chosen by his family for convenience and family ties. But he continued, eyes glued to her. Now I wish I would have met you before, then I would have made you mine sooner. And right now you would not be so nervous. Her heart did a funny little thing as he made clear, and she blushed. She lowered her gaze and bit her lips, her fingers twisting in her lap, this time not nervous. She was shy, blushing. Then if you would have met me before, would you also have gone for dates like teenagers? She teased, and his laugh filled the room. It sounded so perfect. In fact, everything about him seemed perfect, and the way he talked to her did not feel like they had never talked before. His hand gently lifted her chin, making her look at him. The touch felt warmth between her and a tingling feeling all over. Would have done so much more than that. His eyes caressed her and his gaze seemed to seep through her. But this moment itself is not late. I have you with me right now and I like the feeling of it because I knew the instant this was what I wanted. It could not have been better than this, not better than you. She believed what he said, putting aside her fears. Their marriage felt like a fate, responsible for uniting soulmates. Now my turn, she whispered in a breathy voice, deeply affected by his touch. You asked me what I was thinking, and she believed too that nothing could have been better than him. I was scared, yes, but I wanted all my fears to go aside so I could live in that moment where I was getting married to someone who made my heart flutter at first sight. As she confessed finally after holding it in, his head tipped and she felt. creating a distance between their faces, his eye reading through her. Are you still fearful, Ryan?
Every passing hour,
No, she whispered, breathless, the intimacy feeling magically scorching. Just a little nervous, but it's okay, I know we have to do it, and to be honest with you, before she could finish giving him her consent, a small frown adorned his handsome brows, prompting him to ask, "To what, Ryan?" Her cheeks heated. She was surprised to know that wasn't the first thought in his head right now, and she hesitated before saying, "You know, that." She wondered if she had to be so explicit. He chuckled slightly, and this time it was her turn to frown. "Is that what you're so nervous about?" he asked. She stammered, caught off guard. "Ryan, if you're not ready, we do not have to do it," he reassured, surprising her. She looked up to find sincerity in his eyes. "What?" she exclaimed. The idea of opting out of a long-standing family tradition seemed foreign. "But this ages-old tradition in our families, how can we?" "I care more about what my wife wants than some tradition. Our families might be disappointed." Jungkook dismissed it. "Our families won't dictate me when and how I love my wife," tipping his face closer to her, snatching her breath away. "Once my wife is ready, that will be my decision to make." Her heart fluttered and she felt a tingle between. It felt like a dream how much he adored her. The look in his eyes was melting her completely. "It's just that," she lowered her gaze, "my mother will say I jinxed my marriage by being irresponsible." "Seems like mother-in-law has been giving you a hard time." "No, it's just she has expectations from me and I'm afraid she would not like it." His voice softened. "Look at me, Ryan," and she raised her gaze, charmed by him. "No one will say a word to my wife. No one will question her decision. I promise you that. Now you're my wife. No one gets to boss you around." While Ryan felt reassured by whatever promises he made, she wondered about Jungkook's family. It was evident Ryan's family won't speak against Jungkook but didn't know about Jungkook's family, though from his way of speaking it was quite clear he made the rules he did not follow. The things he said meant a lot to her. She was glad that she got to know his pure intentions, which led to her fear wholly fading away, replaced by feeling infatuation. Meeting his gaze, Ryan admitted, "I believe you, but I respect our tradition. And like I was going to say before, with you, I'm always ready." It was a bold statement coming from her, and she saw the desire flicker in his eyes as he heard that. He was captivated as he confirmed, "You sure, dear wife?" His voice was low. "Yes, I am," she asserted, sensing tension in the air. Jungkook gazed into Ryan's eyes, his voice tender as he spoke. "I'd be foolish to refuse."
To a flame